to Lexi's Book Nook. This is my podcast. If you're watching me on YouTube, this is my booktube. I also have a Bookstagram and Book Talk. If you're listening to this and you cannot see me, you're on Spotify. This is my free Spotify podcast episode. If you are on YouTube, you're seeing me live. This is also for free, where you can see my face, the books, my book nook, get inspiration for your own book nook. If you are on Patreon, then you got the full benefits, $3 a month. You can see my face again. You have my book nook. You can see the book titles. You can get to see the book art and my new decoration. So for those who are on BookTube, if you can see it, I got this new art. It says one more chapter. I found it on the internet. My mom has a Cricut. She made it into a very nice decoration for me. So if you have Patreon and BookTube, that is an added benefit to see some art, some my book nook and inspiration, all that jazz. So if you're listening to the end of the month recap for my little book club that my podcast is all about, where I will talk about 2 books from my book clubs. One of them is back in my hometown. It's called Books on Tap, where we decide on a book together. We read it. We meet at a local bar and we discuss it like it's very casual. The other book club is here, where I am currently living, so I'm part of 2 book clubs. I will also discuss Reese Witherspoon's book club, and then some books on my TBR list. If you don't know what that means to be read. And I'm going to try to keep those books in theme for the month. So February, can anybody guess what the theme is? It is romance. So most of my books are romance themed. The book club ones, maybe not so much. But if you have the benefits, we're going to start with the book club that I'm currently in this current location. It's called Jackie and Maria, a novel on Jackie Kennedy and Maria Callas. So I'm going to go over each book, a little review, and then my thoughts and some discussion questions. So for those who have the benefits of Patreon and BookTube, here is the art, and it is what it sounds like. It is Jackie Kennedy, the wife of JFK, and Maria Callas, who was an opera singer of that same time, and their lives intertwine with each other. So I'm going to pull up my notes because I don't have all this memorized, but we will go over this in just one moment. So this is a historical fiction book. It is not romance. The summary is that this novel alternates between the perspectives of former First Lady Jackie Kennedy and a beautiful seasoned opera singer, Maria Callas, through the periods of 1957 to 1977. This historical, somewhat biographical fiction explores the parallel lives between the women who were associated with Greek tycoon Aristotle Onassis. So that's just a brief little summary. My thoughts: I thought this book was interesting. Initially, I thought this book was going to be loosely based on a true story, but later found it was all true. There might be like some little perspectives that may not be, or like some parts that they kind of like buffed up to make the story a little bit more connected and fluid. But knowing that this is a true story makes me very angry because of Aristotle, and I can't fathom using his pet name, which is Airy. But he was my least favorite character. The more I read about him, the less and less I liked him. He was a manipulative, narcissistic, and he was a gaslighter. So there is some romance in here because he does this to his lover, but I really don't like this guy. So now we know who my least favorite character is. I found it really hard to connect with or like a certain character in particular, but it was easier to sympathize with Maria rather than Jackie, and I feel like both of these women deserve better men in their lives. So I was gonna have some notes, and I do have notes, so I'm trying to go off my memory with this. So one of them was like, how are Jackie and Maria similar, and how are they different? And they're both similar because they've had a lot of trauma in their lives. Jackie and her dad didn't have the healthiest relationship, and with her husband JFK, and I am shocked to hear that how little he paid attention to her, how little he cared about her, and him potentially cheating on her throughout the relationship. Maybe I'm surprised, maybe I'm not so surprised, because a lot of presidents seem to have those kind of habits when you learn about it through the lens of history. But knowing that JFK was the first Catholic president and he was really well liked, knowing that he cheated on her made it really hard to read. But Jackie got some trauma from that and not having really any support. And then Maria had the same kind of thing. She was being used by her current husband. He was kind of using her as business, as this famous opera singer, and she later left him for Aristotle because they had a very close and intimate relationship. But her former husband did not treat her well, treated her like money. That's not healthy. And then being with Aristotle for so long, he kind of used her too for just love. He didn't want to marry her despite um, her loving him. He always had a reason for why he couldn't do this or that, or why he couldn't marry her. He had always an excuse for everything and never really fully included Maria in her life. In addition to these love traumas, Jackie and Maria both had this trauma with childbirth. Jackie went through a lot of stillbirths and miscarriages, mostly miscarriages, and that has a huge impact on anybody. The husband as well, he should have some trauma, but Jackie went through a very hard time and she didn't have any support. She was able to deliver her son, but he later died, and she was traumatized with that. She always wanted a child, and she finally got it, and then he passed away. So they have a lot of trauma. How they're different, though, I think Maria had a little bit more support from Aristotle in a way, because he did dote on her a bit, but he seemed to pay more attention to her than he did with Jackie. And yes, Aristotle and Jackie do end up together at some point, but Jackie didn't really have a backbone. She was kind of meh and monotone with her life. She didn't seem very personable, while Maria, you can tell she has a lot of emotion. She's very passionate about her career as a singer, very passionate about having a family and Ari and life in general. So I think that's the stark difference, is the personalities. And another question was do you think Aristotle was all that? And I don't think so. No matter how wonderful he might treat Maria, or how many expensive things he might give her, or there's so many parties for such and such, and going to Jackie and Lee, her sister, when JFK died. Yes, that's all nice, but at the end of the day, you can do nice things, but that doesn't mean you're a nice person. And that's what it boils down to. So no, I don't think Aristotle is worth all that. But those are kind of the questions I want to go over, because I want to keep this romantic. I want to keep this a romance episode. So we're going to end up with that. So that was Jackie and Maria. For the book title again, if you want to, or the cover, if you want to look at it again, here is the cover. Very easy to find in libraries. I was able to read it a little bit on my phone. I don't like reading off my phone, but also listen to the audiobook as well. So that is Jackie and Maria. The next book is Memphis. I read this in January, so I do not have a picture at this time. But I do have discussion questions, and I will go over my thoughts and feelings in the summary as well. So this is by Tara M. Stringfellow. This is women's fiction. So it's not romance. There is some hints of romance in it, but it's not romance as a whole. So Memphis tells the story of an African-American family from one generation to the other. It starts with Hazel, who is the matriarch of the family, to her daughter Miriam, to Miriam's daughter Joan. The narrative is divided throughout the book among their perspectives. The story starts in 1995 as Miriam flees from an abusive marriage with her daughters. They escape in Miriam's childhood home, which now belongs to her sister August and nephew Derek. The lives of these women cover almost 7 decades of Memphis life as they face trials and tribulations such as adolescent Hazel's friendship with a German Jew, Miriam's marriage to a war veteran, history between Joan and her cousin, and the sacrifices August makes for her emotionally damaged son, and the maturation of Joan as an artist. So there's a lot to unpack there. There's a lot of stuff going on, and you can tell from this book there's a lot of trauma as well, but a little different from Jackie and Maria. But my thoughts on this book, I thought it was very beautifully written despite the hardships each of these women faced. It was truly inspiring reading Hazel and Miriam's stories. They both became nurses of a not so young age while raising a family without their partner, so they were single moms basically. Even Miriam's sister August had her own hardships raising her son by herself and losing the love of her life. The books really felt like a tragedy, but with hope mixed in as well. So I have 3 questions for all of these books, and the first one for Memphis is how do Myron and Hazel's lives and deaths reverberate through future generations of their family? So Myron is the husband of Hazel, and they probably have the healthiest relationship out of all that are discussed in this book from each generation, and they truly had a remarkable love story. So there is like the difference right there with their lives, but unfortunately Myron dies and Hazel is left to take care of Miriam by herself, and she named Miriam as like a feminine version of Myron. So that love is so profound right there, and we don't see that in the generations to come. With Miriam, she marries this war veteran, Jackson. He's not really a war veteran at this time, not yet, but he is going into the war and he later serves during 9/11. Jackson and Miriam hit it off right in the very beginning of the relationship, but as they get married and later in the relationship, he becomes very abusive, which is a stark contrast from Myron and Hazel's relationship. But this leads to him leaving the family. Jackson leaves the family. Miriam is left to raise her 2 daughters by herself, and so she moves to her sister's house with a nephew who has molested his daughter. So there's a lot of trauma right here. There's a lot of to unpack. Nothing like Hazel and Myron's family or love situation. So I think the love is there, but I don't think it's lasting and as intimate and passionate as Hazel and Myron's relationship. The second question is Joan's sections are told in first person, while the other North women, which is their surname, North, are written in third person. How did this change in perspective affect your reading experience? Did it make you identify more strongly with any of the characters? And it's yes, yes, and yes. So this is just my opinion. I feel like when an author uses first person, it's more personable. You can actually get to know the character very well. You can see their thoughts more clearly. It's easier to sympathize and empathize with them, and you can start to really form that relationship with the character when using first person. I feel like you don't really get it with second or third person. With second, it seems more like aggressive and like you're going to do this, you do this, and you have that experience. And I feel like second person is more antagonistic. Third person, you don't feel as connected. So you kind of like seeing things from the outside looking in. And this is just kind of like a very brief, like little English lesson, but to the nitty gritty of it, yes, I do think the first person changes my reading experience, and I do identify more with Joan because of the first person. And the third question, and I really like this question, Joan's relationship with her father remains complicated throughout the novel. I did not forgive him for abandoning us, she says. That is too big a thing to forgive. But driving in the Shelby through the streets of North Memphis with Daddy, I couldn't deny how lovely it felt to have one. Do you think it's possible for a relationship to move forward without forgiveness? Why or why not? And I like this question a lot because, little disclosure, I'm Catholic, and I'm all about forgive and forget, forgiveness and reconciliation. And you need to have these things to move on with any relationship. And I'm not going to talk God, I'm not going to talk religion, but you need to have that forgiveness in the other person and the other one to forgive you back to move on. And if it's just a one-sided street, if it's just a one-sided relationship, just one person forgiving, that person might not forgive you back, and you can't truly move on that way. So I think she did forgive him in a sense, and it's complicated because Jackson left the family and she didn't have a father figure. But for a moment she did, but it's just too big of a thing to leave your family, leave them alone, and never come back, and come back when it's convenient for you and given a car as a gift. It's just not really present, and I understand what Joan is saying, but no, you can't move on a relationship if you don't forgive them. So there's a lot in the story. I really hope you like the summary and everything that I touched on. There's a lot to talk about. It is a very interesting book. It's very inspiring, the power of these women, not just as women in general, but women of color and single moms to go through so many adversaries and obstacles and rise up above it and take care of a family. So that is Memphis. The next book we're going to go over is a Reese Witherspoon book. This is the Christie Affair, so I do have the cover for this. And I really like the girl's style in the background. It's kind of bohemian chic, but it has to be in theme with the times. So we're going to go into the Christie Affair. I'm going to pull that up for you. But if you have any guesses on it, it is about Agatha Christie. This is a mystery and historical fiction book, again, not romance, but we do have this for the Reese Witherspoon pick. So the story follows Nan O'Dea, the mistress of Agatha Christie's husband. The Christie Affair takes place in the days before and after Agatha's infamous 11-day disappearance in 1926. While this is not a true story, what happened to Agatha during this time? Where did she go? What does she do? And how is Nan connected to Agatha's disappearance? So I really like these questions. I didn't know that this was a real thing. I didn't think that Agatha Christie disappeared, so this was new to me going into it. So I thought it was very interesting to learn about all this. And one of the questions is about it touches, not really asking that there's been many books and film versions about Agatha Christie's 11-day disappearance, which I did not know. Why does it still hold such an interest to the public? Where do you think she was during that time? And what were the motivations behind her real life disappearance? So these are all questions we can't really answer. So I'm just leaving that there for the audience so you can think about it. I didn't know about Agatha Christie going haywire or disappearing for 11 days. So this book is through the perspective of Nan O'Dea, the mistress. And one of the questions is why do you think the author used Nan for the perspective? And I think it just makes it a little different, a different perspective, another idea why Agatha disappeared. And really, in this book, Agatha goes missing after trying to save this marriage that's kind of falling apart. She knows that her husband is cheating on her, and she knows that she doesn't know who it is until he tells her that it's with Nan O'Dea. You know her, but I'm going to leave you for her. And so Agatha kind of goes haywire in a sense and goes missing for 11 days, just trying to get off the grid. She didn't want to be a part of anything. She just wanted to get away. And the perspective is through Nan and how she had a connection with her husband and hooked up with him, but not really loving him. And it goes into another love story from earlier years. So maybe there is some romance in here. So this is a good pick for February, but you have to read it to find out. I'm just going to ask one or two more questions. So the next one is, did you find Nan sympathetic as the novel went on, or did you believe her actions were self-serving? So her actions were self-serving in the sense that she was kind of using Agatha's husband until her lover will come back again. And she was so uncertain about getting back with her lover. So in a sense, that doesn't sound like we should be sympathetic to her, right? But we go through her traumas in her childhood, becoming pregnant and being by herself with her lover off to war, and realizing she had to move on. And she moved on with her life, and that's what she does with Agatha's husband. But once her lover comes back, everything becomes complicated. So, yes, I actually did sympathize with her. And not just because it was written in first person, like I mentioned in Memphis, but I do think that there are a lot of aspects that make her seem more personable and likable in some ways. She did go through a lot of trauma, so I'm always sympathetic towards people who have very hardships, very hard times in their past, because it's very hard to overcome. But I did find it personable and started to sympathize with Nan. later in the book, because that's when we started learning more about her. And then the last question, we eventually learned Nan's true motivations. It was never about Archie and Agatha, but about their daughter, Teddy. Nan believes that Teddy is her daughter who was stolen from her. Do you believe Teddy was her daughter? Why or why not? So, if you listened this long and you heard she was using Archie, Agatha's husband, to get to her daughter because she believes that her daughter was given up to the Christie family. So she was using Archie to get to her daughter. Yes, I do think that actually happened. So there's a lot to unpack here. Learning through Agatha's husband's mistress's perspective. That's a lot to think about, and why Agatha went missing and who she finds on her MIA mission, and while Nan is trying to get her daughter back. But I really like this book. I thought it was very interesting. I learned a lot. I did not know Agatha actually went missing for 11 days. Apparently there's a lot of stories like this of why and what people might think and theorize. So read the Christie Affair to see what this perspective is all about. So the next book, I actually listened to this as an audiobook, is Beloved by Toni Morrison. And it's not what I thought, because I thought it was going to be more of a romance, and it really is not. So I'm going to pull up those notes as well. And I don't think I have them. But, okay, so Beloved is staring unflinchingly into the abyss of slavery. This spellbinding novel transforms history into a story as powerful as Exodus and as intimate as a lullaby. Setha, its protagonist, was born a slave and escaped to Ohio, but 18 years later she is still not free. She has too many memories of Sweet Home, the beautiful farm where so many hideous things happened, and Setha's new home is haunted by the ghost of her baby, who died nameless and whose tombstone is engraved with the single word, Beloved. Filled with bitter poetry and suspense as taut as a rope, Beloved is a towering achievement by Nobel Prize laureate Toni Morrison. And I can't find these notes for some reason, and I thought I had them. But there were some questions about slavery and African American history, and what do we thought about Beloved's ghost. So Beloved is a person, and it's not being just beloved. Yes, the baby was, but there's going to be some more questions about slavery and what did it mean when Beloved left, when her ghost left. But I'm not finding it, so I'm very, very sorry. But this was a little dry to me listening as an audiobook, because it did feel a little bit like a history lesson or a book report or a lecture at some times. But it was quick to go through, and there are some parts that I really like the dialogue and the relationships that happen and the interactions with the characters. But again, it's not what I expected. I thought it'd be more of a romance story for February, but rather it's about the baby Beloved. And I think this is a very good book for February, though, because it is African American History Awareness Month. So this is a very perfect pick for this. So I'm just going to say I recommend it, especially for anybody who is in school right now, elementary and up, or if you're in college, if you're a teacher, I recommend you have your students read this, because I think there is some history that can be unpacked, and it's also a story. So this is Beloved, and we're going to move on. We have two more books. Now we're moving on to my TBR list, and this is Love on the Brain. So this is more fun, and if you're looking on BookTube, it is a girl in a guy's arms, and of course they're in love, because this is February and we're reading all about romance. So we're going to go into Love on the Brain. This novel follows the story of a doctorate-level neuroscientist B who embarks on an important career-high assignment. She is co-leading a project at NASA, but has to work with her old grad school nemesis Levi Ward, and eventually falls in love with him. So there's not much to unpack, because it's all kind of assuming that they're gonna fall in love. But if you're looking for a trope for a type of romance book, this is an enemies to lovers trope. Well, I'm not a huge fan of this because I don't know. I think it's kind of very silly to like hate somebody and then eventually love them. I know they're very strong emotions, but I feel like they're just so opposite, and it's really hard to overcome that hatred. At least for me, I don't really get angry, so when it happens, it's intense. So to have this kind of enemies and hatred kind of bond, it's very hard for me to believe that they can fall in love. But that's just my opinion, and that's why I'm not a huge fan of this trope. But it was a very fun book. I've read only like one other book by Allie Hazelwood, and they have like a quirky sense of style to it, humor, a little bit of snarkiness. And I really like the personalities of being her assistant, who is really goth and very serious, but it's really funny as well, the way that it's presented. So I thought this book was very fun and hilarious. And not only is this an enemies the lovers trope romance book, but it's like opposites attract a little bit. So there are two romances revealed in here. Obviously, it's this girl and a guy that's on the cover, but there's one that you might not know. And there wasn't any really discussion questions on the internet about this, so I'm just going to say that there is a plot twist near the end. B, when she gets to NASA for her project, they don't have their computers ordered. There's nothing there. There's no way to collect data. Their swipe card to get in isn't working. And she feels like her nemesis, Levi, is against them. But there's really other stuff going on. And it's very interesting to see what gets revealed in here. B is also, I don't know, like she has like a pen name in a sense. On Twitter called "What Would Marie Curie Do?" And one of my questions, like I came up with, was to say why was Marie Curie her idol? And it's kind of mentioned in the book, but it's her idol because Marie is like the leading woman of science of the ages, and she was such a prominent figure and had so many successes despite some facts that were thrown out in the book all about Marie and her love history and her wedding and how she overcame so many things in the field of science. So I think that's why B chose Marie Curie as her idol, and she wanted to resonate with that in a more personal sense by using social media. So she came up with that handle, "What would Marie Curie do?" And another question I had listed was, what would Marie do in the case of not having computers, things not working the way they should be, or working with her nemesis? And I think Marie would be, quite frankly, a badass. I don't think she would put up with it. I think she would go to the people in charge or the appropriate people about, why do I not have my computers? Give me some computers, make it work. Like getting things done and being straightforward. I think Marie would have the backbone to go to the right people. While she hated Levi, she didn't really do anything about it. Eventually, she thought about it, and she did go to Levi about this situation. But she realized she had to go to his higher up and realized that was not the best tactic. But if it was Marie, I think she would dive in head first. And I think if she were to work with her nemesis, she would not bother really focusing on him or her and focus on the work, getting stuff done that needs to be done, and really getting the project done in an efficient and successful way. So I didn't really have any questions, but those were like the ones that I could come up with. And it's really about Marie Curie and like why that was such a prominent thing in this book, why B used her as an idol and used her for social media and for higher causes. There's more to go off of in here. Why and how was this Twitter page useful? And I want to say there's a plot twist. Despite all that, someone betrays the whole project, but who is it? So I want to leave that up to my readers so you can read this and buy your own copy from my affiliate link on my website. So that is Love on the Brain. And the last book that we're going to go over is Love in Color. So this is like a mythical retelling of stories from around the world. I thought this was really interesting. because again, it's romance, but think of is mostly like African mythology stories, but think of all the myths that you might think of, but make it modern, and that's what this is. And I thought it was really fun. But real quick, Love and Color is a collection of mythical tales from around the world retold in a modern way. The author, Babalola, reimagines Greek, African, Middle East, and Chinese myths. She has created captivating stories that travel across genres, continents, and perspectives. So, I kind of already gave my thoughts. I thought it was very fun to read, and especially for February because they're all love stories. Forget what you know about the women in these mythologies that and I'm going to go over them in a second because they're going to be reimagined as these strong, independent goddesses, but they're kind of told in the sense that they're mortal with normal lives, jobs, and relationship troubles. So it's going to cover a lot of mythical goddesses. So I'm going to go over each of these girls, and I'm going to probably butcher their names, and you might not really know who these are, so I'm going to have like a little blurb of their history real quick. So the female goddesses in the story are Asen, Scheherazade, Nefertiti, Ya, Sia, Psyche, Nelele, Xenu, Thisbe, Tiara, Orin, and Alagomegi. And real quick, I'm just going to go over all of them. Osun is the river goddess who is one of the most important characters in Yoruba mythology. Osun is the goddess of love, sensuality, water, and the protective deity of the river Osun. She is also associated with fertility, lushness, greenness, and life. Scheherazade is the major female character and storyteller in the Middle Eastern tales known as 1001 Nights. At the end of this book, she finally told the Sultan that she had no more tales to tell him. He had slowly fallen for her beauty, charm, and intelligence, and eventually he saw the error of his ways and injustices he wrought and professed his love to her. Nefertiti was a teenage Egyptian queen and great royal wife. She has been celebrated for her beauty. Her name means a beautiful woman has come. Ya was an influential Ashanti queen at the beginning of the 20th century. She was a skilled farmer before ascending to the title of Queen Mother in the 1880s. Sia is a Hindu goddess and female protagonist of the Hindu era. She is known for her dedication, self-sacrifice, courage, and purity. Psyche is a Greek goddess, lover of Eros, aka Cupid. Love. She is the Greek goddess of the soul and is represented with butterfly wings. Her beauty intimidated Venus and made her jealous, but made Cupid fall in love with her. Nelele is a Lesothian myth. I don't know where that is. As she's from a story titled How Kosi Chose His Wife, which is about a girl whose parents cover her in crocodile skin to hide her beauty. Xenu was the seventh daughter of the Jade Emperor. One day she came down to earth. While bathing in a river, a cowherd named Yulong fell in love with her over her beauty, and the two fell in love with each other. Thisbe is a character of Metamorphosis by the Roman poet Ovid. She lived in Babylon and was the lover of Pyramus. They both lived in connected houses but forbidden to marry by their parents. Tiara, I did some research and I couldn't really find anything on her. I don't know what mythology she is or where she originates. The same with Alagomegi. But Orin, I think they meant Orion. I think they meant to have that name for the constellation, who is a man. But Orion was named after a giant in Greek mythology. He was an accomplished hunter and a friend to the gods. However, Artemis was a part of Orion's story and played a huge role in her becoming the patron goddess of hunters. So I think the chapter is meant to be Orion when you see it in here. But the girl that's discussed or told in the story is Artemis, and she receives like a little golden necklace with some arrows. So I'm not really going to do any discussion questions for this one, Love and Color. I just want to go over like the goddesses, and there's a very brief story about them. That way, when you buy your copy for this book, you kind of have a backstory before you read the retelling. So those are all the books for this month. So again, it was Memphis by Tara M. Stringfellow, We had The Christie Affair by Nina de Gramont, Beloved by Toni Morrison, Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood, and Love in Color by Bolu Babalola. Those are all the February books. If you listened to my first episode for February, there are 2 additional books I didn't get to. That was The Hypnotist Love Story by Leanne Moriarty and Thick as Thieves by Sandra Brown. So those 2 I did not get to. However, I will have that on my list for next year, for next February. So I hope you stick around for that long. We will have more episodes to come. And I really hope you enjoyed this episode. This was all about the February books. Again, if you're listening on Spotify, this is free content. If you want to watch me on YouTube or BookTube or Patreon, you can also follow me on Lexi's Book Nook there. Patreon, you get the added benefits of $3 a month to see my face, the book titles, my Book Nook, and get inspiration for your own Book Nook. And you can also support the podcast that way. If you don't want to, there's also BookTube or YouTube that you can find. I also have a book talk that is actually different. It's RD_Lexi, Lexie. I also have a Bookstagram, Lexi's Book Nook, and my website, lexisbooknook.com. That is spelled Lexies, booknook.com, where you can find more of my reviews, my ratings, when I read them, you can see how fast I read. If you want to do that, I also have my affiliate link, so you can buy your own copy from these books. I will get a small commission based off what you purchase. And that is it for this episode. So I really hope you enjoy this episode and you liked listening to it. And I hope you keep on reading.